a way to get on the full screen now, or is that a full screen?
I think that's its full screen.
It's pretty good right there.
Y'all feel comfortable with that?
Yeah, it's good.
Fine, I can back up, see up.
Oh, I see. It's a good looking building.
That's a good way to start the meeting. It gets you back a cup of coffee.
It looks good looking.
Well, this is the kind we're looking at now.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's different than I thought Somerville would ever be, but it's okay.
Yeah, I can do it.
Sure.
Well, this is a white wood frame building.
Hmm.
I don't know.
Very trusty. Okay.
Every time Louis Myers or Anthony Miller, Dr. Miles, you get the ring the bell and bell down.
Wish it were still there.
All right, I think we're ready, guys, so. Turn it over.
Ready? Well, thank you all for coming in for another workshop. We really appreciate that. My name is Robert Poppleton. I've had the pleasure of meeting you all before with the developer Furman Company. With me today is James White with Furman, who's our project manager. We have George Schaefer and Heather Mitchell with Boudreaux, all of which you've had a chance to meet in the past. Thank you, Adam and Mario, for joining us from the county. And really, we wanted to take the opportunity to build off of our last conversation in December and our gathering with you in October. The feedback you provided in both sessions, especially in December, was very valuable to our team. We've spent the last several months reacting to that, allowing it to inform this next level of design material, which we're excited to share with you today, primarily focusing on building architecture. Peter, we know you and your colleagues here have been eager from your comments to start to understand how we are thinking about architecture. So you're getting a slight preview on the screen currently, but we have many perspectives to share, lots of detail to review, and happy to also recap on anything that we've covered in the past, but also didn't want to dedicate too much planned time in our presentation, which might be 15 minutes, but allowing for the majority of our afternoon to be around conversation, seeking additional reactions and feedback from all of you to prepare us for our next formal submission, which we are positioning to be as soon as the May meeting. So happy to, we will jump in and be part of this conversation, knowing that we've already covered a lot of ground on how we got to where we are today. So thank you for hearing us out on history last meeting. Highlight of that history is we went through multiple years of community coordination and discovery of community priorities, which led to our current site plan. That is highlighted by a preservation effort around some of the existing hospital building that will function as the heart of the site, in really building Somerville forward from there in a lot of these new additions to the 500 North Main block, which we are hoping capture Low Country our appeal and design, and really speak to what Somerville is. So with that, I want to pass it to you, George. Heather, George, if you guys would like to walk us through some of the presentation.
Thank you all for being here and for your time. My name is George Schaefer. I'm an architect that's been working on this project as long as it's been in existence for our firm. So we're really pleased to be able to share with you sort of the development, and your feedback on the master plan in general was so informative, and we look for that level of discourse today as we're focusing particularly on the 3-story county office building and the adjacent park. So today we're going to just give you a recap of where the master plan is based on our last conversation with you. I'm going to touch on the summary of feedback that we've already heard from you from the conceptual review and our work session, about the overall character of the development. And then deep dive into how the office building in particular and the park have both iterated significantly since the last time that you saw it at our conceptual presentation. So our goals for today obviously are just to catch everybody up in terms of the context and the master plan. We want to make sure we've touched on and come to consensus on the feedback that we've already received from you, and hopefully demonstrate the way that the design as it's developed has responded to that. Contextualize what is included in the phase one site, focus on the county office building and the open space design, and hopefully come out of this meeting with a consensus about design strategies in that what we're showing with you today is you feel is quintessentially Somerville in terms of its character and approach. And then just quickly touch on next steps if necessary to potentially come back to you as early as May for our preliminary review. So I'm going to fly through a lot of what is just about understanding the context for the site, because you've seen this and everybody in this room is very familiar with it. But I will say that what we're presenting today is very much in alignment with our a core belief about this property being a threshold to downtown Somerville, and in particular, the Highway 78 North Main Street corner, the office building and the open space sort of anchor as a part of this development. So keeping that in our minds, and particularly in terms of this corner view into the site, is really critical in terms of what we've developed here. So I will just sort of flash through these, and just a reminder of what the existing conditions of the site are, and overall the constraints and the challenges and the opportunities presented with having the existing building on the site, which we discussed in depth at our last work session. So the image on the right is a more detailed view of the phase one of the project that we're talking about today, but it also is in the context of the entire master plan, which you discussed with our team in our last work session. So on the upper right-hand corner, just to orient you, that is West Fifth and North Main. The large gray element is the three-story county office building. That is fronting both the interior of the site, but also Highway 78, and has a significant frontage as well on the park. You can see expanded park design that spans from the corner all the way down to in front of the existing hospital structure. And you can see in gray the amount of the existing building that is being proposed to remain on site for phase one. Phase one also includes the site infrastructure. So you can see we're using existing curb cuts off of 4th Street that lead up past the existing hospital building and leading to the three-story county office building. We're shifting a curb cut on 4th that's closer to Cedar inwards so that we can accommodate future development in future phases of the master plan, and then a right in and a right out on Cedar Street, all of which you've seen before. But in this, you can see ultimately at the end of phase one, everything that is detailed in terms of line weight and building is what we will have on site at that time. So some of the things we heard from you last time. So when we came to you and presented what were admittedly very conceptual massing and character studies, at the conceptual review, what we heard from you is that low country character is really key, that our understanding of a building and its character, its massing, that is quintessentially Somerville, is critical. Some of the words you discussed specifically were symmetry, and that's not only important just in terms of Somerville in general, but given that the symmetry is critical to the existing building on site. That was the word you used, the legibility of the building, so people knowing where to enter. Does the building really tell people and anybody using it how to use it? You mentioned brick, shutters, and sunshades. We talked specifically about the character of the existing hospital building, and you had articulated that you felt like that was particularly appropriate on the smaller building, but not necessarily on the county office building, given its scale related to that building. In looking at the initial massings, you felt like the east, south, and west, so that would be the park elevation, the main entry elevation, and the Cedar Street elevations. You felt that they were more appropriately masked and articulated, but you had some concerns about the character that we had shown on North 5th Street. In particular, you felt like it needed more nuance and articulation across that facade element. You had mentioned the idea of how to make this building more welcoming from the Fifth Street pedestrian sidewalk. And suggested us looking at the potential of adding an entrance to that building, and you'll see how we address that. And then you asked us to look at other projects that you either recently reviewed or have been approved in either through the Board of Architectural Review or through your committee, including the new central, the CPW building complex that has recently gone through preliminary review. And we have done all the things, and hopefully you can see that research has paid off in terms of what we're proposing here. So this view that we're showing you right now is as if you're standing on a second floor restaurant balcony for a phase 2 retail restaurant building overlooking the site. You can see in the corner of the view the existing 2-story hospital portion that is going to remain. You see an overview of the park, a pavilion element that sits in the park, and then the 3-story office building beyond. Some of the main conceptual design strategies that we brought to you in terms of how the building massing and articulation is being organized are ring true now, just as they did last time we saw you. There's a 2-story brick base that aligns in scale with the dimension of that element, and the dimension of the 2-story hospital building have a relationship to each other. So even though we have a 3-story building, we're being sensitive to the scale and the importance of that mass on our site. That the 3rd-story element sort of recedes visually, so that it reinforces that idea, and that much of the 3rd story has a material change and a darker color to assist with that strategy. That the facades that we're presenting today have an implied symmetry on all 4 facades, and that is a direct reference to our understanding about how the symmetry of the existing building creates a legible and understandable human experience with the building. There is a corner colonnade element in the 3-story office building that is our response to how to engage and invite people from the 5th Street sidewalk both into the park and also into the county office building. The 3rd-story terrace and overlook elements. So on the 3rd floor, we have 2 balcony elements that overlook the park, but also have views to hopefully to downtown Summer Mills Historic District. We are primarily using brick, but we're trying to layer in some stone accents, specifically in reference to how stone is thoughtfully and clearly used on the existing hospital building. And the way that we've approached sort of like brick detailing is modest but impactful, and is a reference not only to the existing building, but to the case studies that we have been looking at in Somerville. So obviously, in looking at just some of the images that inspire us as a design team, the first place we look is Somerville, and not only its historic past, but also more recent architecture that is in the historic district. So all of these things we hope are visible cues and references as you see how we approach 3-story office building, but also some of the case study projects that you specifically directed us to, like the Public Works Complex that you see in the bottom left-hand corner, the Bon Air project, which is under construction and recently approved by the Board of Architectural Review, and other low country and civically scaled precedents that we feel are appropriate to low country character. What we didn't have last time we saw you was floor plans that explained how the county is going to leverage and use this building. And so we wanted to not spend a ton of time on these, but it'll give you a sense to why the architecture is masked and articulated in the way that it is. So this is the ground floor plan, and to orient you, 5th Street is to the north. To the right side of the page where it says park is obviously where the park is and the main street frontage. The primary entrance and the master plan entry is to the south, and then where it says staff entry, that is facing Cedar Street. It's important to understand that for the county to function in this building, it is a single access point building. And what that means is everybody that comes into this building who's not an employee or staff comes through the main entry, and that is on the plan south here behind the live stream it says the public entrance. And so we do have a main entry to the building, but we are designed the first floor to include a prominent human scale colonnade that wraps around it on the south side and all the way to Fifth Street. So you can see anybody that's coming from either crossing Main Street or having crossed Cedar, approaching the building can access the building and connect to the main pedestrian boulevard from Park and Main Street, which runs to the south along the building. Staff will primarily enter from the west side of the building. The building is also organized so that the public spaces are the spaces that have adjacency to the most beautiful public spaces on the property. So you can see on the first floor, as people enter into the center and go through security, primarily people are coming to have direct interaction with public service counters, so your treasurer, assessor, auditor department. All of that happens in sort of what we're calling the living room of the building, which is tucked on the right-hand side of the plan. So that the place where the public is spending most of their time interacting with county staff is an extension of the colonnade, which is the front porch, and then an extension of the park too, as well. There are also public engagements on every floor of the building. So on the second floor, we have building services and planning and zoning. There are also public service counters on that level. So public will come up to this level and also engage with county staff. And then on the third floor, we have the county chamber space. So, in their current configuration, they have 2 building entries, 2 points of security, one for folks coming to council meetings, others coming to pay their tax bills. Everybody's coming into the same place this time, so a third floor county council chamber works. And you'll see that's on the right-hand side of the plan, and you'll see that the way that the massing starts to address the additional volume that space needs, and also create some hierarchy on the elevation that faces the park. The other important piece to know about this is that you can see with all of the green arrows that we have 2 spaces on this third level that provide opportunities for the public, staff, employees to sit outside at an upper level and have a prospect onto the park space and potentially to downtown Somerville. So on the plan south, we have a large terrace that's the extension of the waiting area for council. So it's an overflow space, but it's also a place where employees could have their lunch and enjoy eating outside. And then there's a covered overlook that's accessed directly on plan right. It's accessed directly from the county chamber space. So these are the most recent schematic design elevations for the project, and we're gonna deep dive into those. But just to orient you, at the top of the page, we have the north elevation, which is Fifth Street elevation. And you can see on the left hand of the page, the colonnade element that invites people through, and underneath that higher mass that's defined by the county chamber space on the third floor. The center elevation is the main entry, so that is the elevation that faces the existing hospital building and will provide the single point of secure access for all public that enter this building. On the bottom left is the park facing elevation, and you can see that mass that's defined by the third floor council chambers creates a hierarchy and an element in that facade, and also a covered overlook. And then the elevation on the right-hand side is of the employee entrance on the left side of the building. So we thought it would be useful to just explain how the building massing and articulation really has shifted since the last time you saw it. So in October 2025, the mass and the design of the building that we presented to you is on the bottom left-hand side. Some of the feedback we got that, the symmetry seems off, the idea that the entry is sort of pulled to the right. It doesn't make a very legible facade. Where is sort of like the balance in the center of this building? The elevation that we have now has clearly defined the primary entry of the building for wayfinding, but it also creates a implied symmetry and balance in the center of the building. And you can start to see how the two-story mass element that's sort of creating the scale that's comfortable to the adjacent hospital building is created, the setback for the third floor in the darker gray color. And then you can see on the ground floor, the colonnade element that creates that embrace and that front porch adjacent to the park that invites people in, or is the threshold from the building into the park. And the third floor terrace that is also the park overlook. That also applies to the east elevation, and we only did these diagrams for these two facades, but the park facing elevation is also another place on the building where this transformation happened pretty significantly. So you can see in the massing diagram from the October elevation, all of the weight of the building was pushed to the left-hand side. There was an implied symmetry to it, and that it was literally half of the building, but it was a little bit illegible in terms of where you enter the building if somebody's approaching from Main Street. The April 2026 articulation again creates that 3-story element that creates a hierarchy. It holds on the third floor that council chamber space, which needs a little bit more volume and height into it to make it a comfortable space for 150 folks to be in that space. And so this just gives you a sense of what you saw and where we are. So we'll go elevation by elevation really quickly. So this again is the main entry elevation, and hopefully what you can start to see here is how the massing and the articulation is working in alignment with the guiding design principles of the project, but we also wanted to deep dive so you get a sense of the material palette that we're talking about. So the primary brick is a brick that matches the existing hospital building, and that is on the 2-story base, but it's on the portion of the 3-story element that houses the council chamber space. We're starting to layer in thoughts about using cast stone in the same way that this photo in the center left is. That's the existing entry to the hospital building. So thinking about ways that we can reference that without mimicking it. And appropriate to the scale of this building in relationship to that one. So you can see that we're starting to explore ways that the stone can define the primary entry of the building, create a recess space to get people out of the weather potentially, and also create the placeholder for signage on the primary entry of the building. The secondary palette, the accent material palette, is a much darker color. It's a bronze, antique bronze color. It has both metal panel, which you can see on the 3rd floor primarily, but also there are points of darker brick that is the same bronze color for when we want I'll show you this perfect instances where we like the color, but we're not looking to add more metal or storefront to the project. This is the east elevation, so this is the park fronting elevation. And again, you have the larger 3-story mass. And this is where you start to see, you can see it everywhere on the project, but what I want to touch on here is the way that we're trying to create sort of a motif in the way that we think about ornament or detailing for the building. Herringbone and chevron pattern brick is something that is quintessentially Somerville. You see it in your sidewalks. You definitely see it in Short Central. It is something that exists on some recessed brick panels on some of your historic buildings. I particularly like the chevron motif because I think it also has a biophilic nature that can speak to the flower town in the pines. It has a very biophilic presence to me, and so you can start to see where we're thinking about metal railings, using that chevron pattern to define a custom rail element. There are some instances where we have brick infill above windows, and that would have the chevron or herringbone brick pattern to create some interest on a large facade of brick. And then there are instances where we have storefront infill panels, particularly in the part of the storefront that is hiding the ceiling plenum and the floor structure beyond, where we are imagining that chevron pattern is something that creates some relief and some shadowing in those elements. This is the Highway 78 facade. And here this is true on all of the facades, that one of the things that is really important to us is that when we start to think about the cornices of each element of the project, that we're thinking about the way that cornices are articulated throughout Somerville. And so you can see that we're starting to layer in brick detailing in the cornices that create sawtooth patterns. We have corbelling, we have corbelled brackets. And so much of what you see on Short Central or a number of your historic buildings in downtown, we're trying to layer those in a way that is contemporary, that is clearly a reference to the way that buildings meet the sky. And then this again is just the last elevation, but this is the west elevation, so this is the facade that welcomes most staff and employees. The primary element on this facade in the center is a 3-story stair. So that stair is revealed through a larger span of storefront, and then also a covered area that allows employees to wait outside of the weather on that west side of the building. So I'm gonna walk you around the building now in a series of renderings. So this is looking at the Highway 78 and the park facing east facade. And with these renderings, you'll start to get a glimpse of how the architecture, some of the motif and character and materiality is starting to also become present in the way that we're thinking about architectural elements, brick walls, those types of elements that are also defining the edge and creating a safe environment for the adjacent park. This is a view from the park, so the large plaza that holds the fountain. You can see there's the relocated Veterans Memorial to the right with 3 flags. And so the corner of the office building has a direct relationship to this primary plaza, which is also the axial terminus for the pedestrian boulevard that leads you into the site, but also into the main entry of the building. You can see the ground floor colonnade element that creates a human scale at that level, and the 3rd floor terraces as well. And the way that the cast stone in the main entry piece is providing a contrast that invites and clarifies entry into the building. This is the master plan south facing facade, so you can see a little bit closer in detail the way that we're thinking about storefront articulation, brick articulation, and detailing the metal panel, the way we're using sunshades on the facades where that is actually a performative element, and then the way that we're defining entry into the center of the building. And then looking at the west elevation where the employees will come and go, and then also the Highway 78 primary facade. So I thought this would be a good, we have some slides that speak specifically to the park, and I can stop if you want to just talk about the building, or if you'd like me to run all the way through and just present the whole thing. Do you feel like?
I'm prepared to talk about the building.
Okay, sure.
Peter, we also have hard copy drawings over here, if any fun, it's helpful to see in the poster.
First, it is, can you go back to the site plan?
Sure.
So I don't recall the reason, whether it's the board or at the last workshop meeting, that the initial concept of a corner entrance now went into the middle, because at the end of that session, I was convinced that the corner entrance was correct for the vista coming down your main road, entering the site.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was maybe one of the reasons why you even put it there. And now you moved it to the middle just to make it symmetrical. I don't think symmetry is
Too big.
that written in stone
Sure.
for low country architecture.
Understood.
I mean, there's Queen Anne's and
course.
there's Victorians, and those are asymmetrical.
Correct.
So I'm not quite sure whether the emphasis on the center of the building, and I understand the internal flow, you do
Sure.
want people to come through the center,
Yes.
but that entry portico is that important, and I think it's maybe a mistake to put it in the middle of the building versus where you originally had it. And I also thought that, the Main Street short elevation is important to our public because, that's gonna be the vista people are gonna quickly see your building.
Yeah.
And right now, it just looks like a 3-story brick building.
This.
Right.
It's 3-story.
As opposed to, I think you originally had it broken up and you had more texture. What I think these elevations lack. And it's hard to see in the elevation, is the texture. That you're trying to create with the chevron brick,
Mhm.
you know, if you're gonna do in my opinion, a brick pattern. That's gonna be different than your
Yeah,
typical common bond. Maybe the brick is a different color to give it more emphasis.
sure.
I mean, if you use the same brick throughout. You really have to stare and say, oh, that pattern was different than that pattern, and I don't think that's.
Yeah, so right now, I just so that it's clear, I think I absolutely understand your point. The places where we're leveraging the darker brick for accent are the vertical stripes. In the primary facades, I think of this element. And then we're leveraging it in this primary storefront system, so that this reads. And provides more verticality as opposed to the, but I think what I hear you saying, Peter, is that. Where we're showing, potentially where we're showing
Too subtle.
a chevron pattern right here in the bottom. That people might not get what we're trying to build as a motif, if it's too subtle.
And it's a good idea
Yeah,
to create a different texture. I think my overall impression, it lacks texture. It just looks like a brown brick building.
Right.
But you're articulating a lot of texture. But I don't see it readily, and could be the renderings or whatever.
do you feel like, that's a good question, and we have been. In our design conversations, we've been struggling with how simple the detailing is on the existing hospital building. And we've been in this struggle between too much texture and too much. Reveal and patterning in this new building in reference to that. So I'm just curious if you have any
I
thoughts
think if you
about.
go back to look at the recently approved Public Works building.
Mhm.
I don't know if you
Yeah.
did have a rendering of that.
Do,
Yeah, there was one.
right here,
That has a lot of texture.
it does indeed.
And I think it was the consensus of the board that we like that.
So when you speak
Well,
about.
nobody's talked about the massing, and I think your idea of bringing people in. The other road is a good idea, but I think you added a lot of massing to the building when you did that, and it's just big. I think it's too big. It's not balanced anymore, I know you like it, I don't. I don't.
It's a question about the terrace. Explain to me, so for whatever reason, go back to that picture where you have the original, the one that we looked at, not, yes, that one. So I don't know, in my mind, for some reason, like. This new one, like the terrace is not really defined, does it need to be, and maybe I just don't know the purpose of the terrace. Is the terrace gonna be a small spot just where people who work there come out and maybe eat their lunch? Or is this actually gonna be a spot where people may have a gathering there? I don't know how this works. So that you could have something there to look out, because I feel like it's not emphasized, and I can't even tell there's a terrace
Well,
there.
just give you a.
Like the old one, I felt like you could tell the terrace was there.
This was the terrace.
Right.
in the old building.
Yeah, so
And so this is the
greatly
terrace
right,
on
enlarged.
this one, I mean, the
It's more
concept of the.
enclosed now.
It's not more enclosed, it's really just got a roof element with
Correct.
columns.
Yeah,
So the concept though around it was always that it provided overflow for council
Yeah.
sessions. If there are events in that space.
Right.
If the council chambers is used more as a multifunctional space, it could also be an
Sure.
extension. It gives life and a safe place for. County employees to have lunch and do things like that, because right now they have a courtyard
right.
that's secured.
Yeah,
This would allow for that, but we also see it as a public space in the building.
that's kind of, yeah,
Every floor of the building is accessible to the public, and this terrace.
right,
Would be something that you could walk up to any day.
right.
And
Go
access.
out there,
Correct,
staying different.
absolutely.
So I just don't know, because I'm not an architect, so y'all need to help me out. Is there any way that we can, I'm not opposed to the mass of it, I'm not opposed to it being in the center, so to speak. I just don't know that I like that where the terrace is and you've got just like a square. Is there any way to make that more defined so we know it's a terrace? So it looks a little, even though we need overhead, but it looks a little more open. Does that make?
In real life,
Fit that under-
you'll be able to tell in real life.
So
Yeah.
this
I-
space.
Yeah, it feels very closed in.
Just go to the,
Sit down, hand
let's
room,
look at the,
you can't
let's
see
look
it,
at
in
the,
there, 'cause there's open hand room.
this guy.
Oh, I see,
Right.
from that angle.
Yeah, that looks better. This,
So.
Okay, so this is, and so there are two terraces, so this is the overlook,
right,
and that overlook is defined as a subtraction from the mass, so this is and this one is only accessed directly from the council chambers.
right. And that, I feel that's closed off too much as well. I don't know if there's an answer to it or if that's the way, but I feel like that terrace. That we can almost make it look like it wraps around, even if it really didn't, I don't know. But it feels very, all of that feels very closed off to me. Again, I'm not opposed to,
Okay, so.
yeah. Yeah. So I don't know.
Very open.
Peter, there's more texture on this rendering too, it changed a little bit. I think
This particular one.
this particular
You
rendering,
can see
Yeah.
and sense it more.
Yeah, I don't,
I think the light is better on the facade, it's falling in such a way that you
It is,
can, you
correct.
can really
I
start to
think so.
see
You can
and
see the
all of
difference.
elements.
for sure. I like all of that. The only thing I would be concerned about maybe was the terrace, and again, maybe it's just the rendering and maybe it'll look a little bit different. But I feel like it could look a little more, it just looks so closed off and nobody's gonna even know there's that terrace on the end. Which, yeah, But-
In real life, you'll be able to tell
Why did, can we go back to the comparison?
Mhm.
Sure. So it's readily apparent on October. You dramatically broke up the mass by having two brick elements and then sort of like the clear strip, you know, and then. April, it's all brick, and I'm reacting the way Candy is in that, that's a big massive building. Versus the October one, even though it's the same size building, I assume.
It
You
is,
broke-
it is the same size.
You broke it up into 3 different components.
Well, you know, we had
It feels fast.
a number
So I
of.
guess the question is, why did you choose to go April? Because to me, it's.
A lot of
very
the
dramatic.
factors have led into why, in particular, the entry has shifted to where it is. Part of it is that the entry on this end of the building made a really challenging condition between security and the public living room space where 72 people are queuing. You don't want to bring everybody into the building where everybody's queuing to pay their tax bills.
it. So that is hard to
But
get.
part of it was a plan helping the county function better with the building than they were, and also that. Since people are entering the building and then going up to every level and that's public. Having the primary entry closer to the building core, which is the elevators, the primary stair. It was better in terms of operations and wayfinding, so that was the primary component that shifted it to the center of the building. The other piece of it is that originally this was a stair element, and because of code and thinking about egress and how the building wanted to function, that stair element now is on the west facade, so this cut is now on the western elevation. We have studied a number of different iterations of this primary entry piece. We've looked at it entirely in cast stone, so that it was very much contrasting and cutting the building directly in half. We've studied it in the darker brick color, so we have looked at that element in many different ways, and I think in the end, we were trying to be as respectful to the existing building as possible and reference it in a way that was more legible. So we have looked at it a way of, in particular, having this element have a more of a visual contrast than it currently does.
What is your reaction to the vista? Aspect of entering the site and seeing the county building from a monumental and, deservedly so,
Yeah,
it's a government building.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's less important, there was a period of time where this made more sense because the park was half as large. So, back when we were originally, let's go to the park actually, so we can look at it in detail. Just so that we're looking at a plan that makes sense. Here we go. So there were versions of this park that were much smaller or had retail buildings even as far as this location in the master plan. And creating an axial condition with the existing building was one thing, and then you had this building that was really primarily looking here. And then when the park was this large, we really felt like that corner piece was in particular very important. We feel like with the park being this large and the potential future building being here, that the legibility of the building entry from anywhere on Main Street was a lot less of an issue, I guess I would say. The other thing that was a driving factor for us too was that vista that you're talking about is very critical for the vehicular entry, but the majority of people coming to this building are parking here. And so the farther away the building entry was from where 99% of the people approaching this building are located, made a lot less sense from legibility standpoint for the building. So it was really trying to just weigh all of the programmatic concerns, what's best from a wayfinding standpoint. Those are all the factors. I agree. I completely get what you're saying because that was really important to us at one time. What you're talking about.
More practical now. More practical the way your parking is laid out on the site.
It's a reflection of a more complex and detailed understanding of how the building is going to operate on a daily basis.
Just from a pure site planning perspective, the hospital entrance has more importance on a site planning perspective than this founded building.
Sure.
Which I don't think is the appropriate hierarchy,
Well, looking at
because that's just gonna be a hotel gift shop.
the, so here's a view sort of looking through the pavilion at the office building and sort of. So looking at. In the absence of being able to reconfigure the building to relocate the main entry, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about how, looking at the elevation that we currently have here, we might be able to address some of your concerns about hierarchy. Is it about making this element feel more like something different than these two? Is it more about the positioning of this piece? I'm just kind of curious in the weight of your comments. What do you feel could be
I think the
successful?
entrance of a government building should have hierarchy. It's important.
Sure.
It's important visual statement as well as a practical traffic statement.
Yep.
You don't really see it.
I mean, you're not showing, I don't know, is this a true perspective or did you eliminate the building, the hospital building in the wing?
No, it's I can show you one that puts it all together. So this is a true perspective too. So this is on the axial walk, the park pavilion, you can see the office entry building here, and then this is the.
You really lose the buildings with the park. The park
The park
screens the building.
screens the building.
Oh, there's
So
no
the
question.
buildings go away.
There's no question that
Park
there's
is-
mature trees.
Park is most important. Once you get into the site, then you see the building.
Then you know
That's
where
what's
you are.
important. And then you need the close access to the front door of the government building, which is, you've done that. By going to the center.
What if we have more stone on that entrance?
It's possible. I mean, I think it's about, I think honestly,
Yeah.
we've been really.
Because like when I look at the hospital, I see a lot of white, I see those columns, right? So perhaps on the county building, our entrance needs a little more of that stone, or just a little more of that whiter color, so that you
Maybe
see
to
the
lighten it up.
Yeah, so that you see that it's the entrance.
Well, the
it-
band across
Do
is
that
good
big-
and bring
big
it
white
down.
band.
some.
That tells you, yeah.
I see that, but I think it needs a little more.
I think it makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
just so you know, when we designed the proportion of the vertical elements, the storefront in this area. The proportion of this piece has a direct relationship to the hospital portico. So if this were all white,
Yeah.
then you would,
Maybe,
I guess the reference would be very obvious, but it would also provide more contrast potentially.
Right.
In the facade as well.
Right. So I think maybe that would help with that. Again, I don't mind it being in the center, and again, that was a really good look. Go back through the trees.
Sure. Sorry, I'm not.
Which I like, because what you really want is to be able to see that part, you know what I mean, the buildings don't need to be, but I think if you look at that through that. That lens, that maybe that front needs just a little more of that shade on it, or more of that lighter.
Can you show us the site plan again? With the park?
would be good.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Very good. So the parks,
So there's a covered part in the park to the right of the circle
Pavilion.
also?
no, so I'll
What is-
I'll walk
Okay,
through for you.
show us
So
that.
there's a perimeter. Wall around the park and gates that lead into it. The primary element that's on axis with the pedestrian promenade in front of the office building is Memorial Plaza. That plaza features two memorials, the existing Veterans Memorial that is currently here. Right against the traffic that we're putting in a quieter, more reverent, safer environment nestled. Within the existing pine trees and some existing oaks that are being saved in this area. And then the Medal of Honor. Statue that's being fabricated will be at 6 o'clock in this plan. Directly at the axis of the pedestrian boulevard. The secondary access through the park organizes connection to the existing access that. Is on center with the portico, which you saw in that perspective. And then the pavilion element, sort of like the outdoor events and performance space. Is the covered structure that is within that park. So that is the only structure. Everything else that you see is a fountain. A statue of Veterans Memorial, landscaping, seat walls. Artificial turf areas so that large events can happen around the pavilion and you can easily see it.
The big thing is you're really doing, right now, all you see is a sea of parking on that property.
Correct.
Everything is
That's
ugly,
right.
because it's all parking.
So
All
this is
parking,
parking, this is
all
parking, and
cars.
then everything around the perimeter.
That all disappears just because of the very nice development.
This
Yeah.
should be nice.
I think I can accept the center entrance now that I see the park,
Mhm.
but I would like.
Some white on it.
Just more, it needs to read
There
its.
needs to be more emphasis. If you look at the size of that versus the hospital. It almost looks smaller. But
Yes.
so it should be more monumental, whether it's color, whether it's size, whether it's stature.
You're looking for some hierarchy on that facade.
You know, it's
It's-
where
It should be higher.
Sorry, George.
Look at this.
I was just showing him the white on
Yeah.
your previous version.
Because it breaks up
Yeah.
the massiveness
Or
of the
stone on
building.
the main entrance.
Looks like food line.
Was
Good,
it?
well, then we got one opinion here on food
It's like
line.
food line.
It does not look like food line.
It's
It does
beautifully
not look
detailed.
anything like food line.
Yeah, I like.
It's
I think
beautifully
that
detailed.
It is, I
Right.
like.
It reduces the size,
Sure.
Yeah.
the ground that you look at.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. So hierarchy in this element so that it reads. It is clear in terms of legibility, but also in reference to the existing building. I think we've been working on this for so long and so sensitive. I wanting to honor the existing building that. And in many ways, a lot of our moods are trying to be respectful of that, and we also have to remember that. We still have to create a hierarchy too.
How about if you just did it with some white pilasters on it? Instead of making the whole thing, what, just do
Understood.
some pilasters,
Understood.
pilasters
In the way that the hospital does.
with the
Yeah,
columns, yeah.
correct.
Okay.
I would maybe think about some options.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
potential.
I don't know if
and
that-
address.
Yeah, I
their
agree.
concern. I think.
I think
I can do
mimicking,
that. We already have that. So, we're anxious to, I wish we had brought them today, so I'm sorry that we didn't.
so if you are thinking of a May presentation. If you come back with perhaps some alternative visions of that. I'm not quite sure mimicking the hospital with,
No.
I wouldn't
That
match
is
the
not the
hospital,
language of our
no.
thing, so it's not about mimicry, it's just trying to take some of the cues, whether it's color, contrast, scale, proportion. Agreed.
now I'd like to address the east elevation.
Sure.
That's almost what I think Tammy was kind of
Mhm.
starting on.
Mm-hmm.
This should be more special.
Okay.
Whether it's the portico happening, coming around, again, I'm not
Needs
suggesting
something.
it wraps around.
Sure.
But right now, it just looks like the short end of the building.
In particular, this element, the weight of it.
Yes,
And
and
just-
if you're in the park, this is what you're looking at, I
Yeah.
guess, and I know that's not, don't get me wrong, that's not the most important, but that is also gonna be your view from Main Street.
Absolutely
Right.
Right.
But, yeah. For me, it's just that closed off,
It's
Feel.
too.
feels closed off, I don't know, I don't know how else to describe that,
Mhm.
but, yeah.
So this is an important elevation for the city.
Absolutely.
This doesn't show the handrail on the third level.
Let's just go to the elevation, that might be easier.
There you go, we've got the
Yeah,
handrail there,
Right.
which you can see here.
that's here, and that's in here as well, so just to orient you, so this
It's
is
that
all
part.
open.
Right.
So you walk under the
through that.
colonnade and then under the
Um,
mass and then connect around and then this is open.
The glass
That's an
thing by the
enclosed.
handrail.
Gotcha.
So you got a lot of variety there that you really can't
You
see.
can't see it.
You can see it a little bit better on the hard copy here, but
Real
later
life,
you can see
it's like-
through to the glass being moved.
Yeah.
Together. You put it into it.
You don't.
No, I think I understand your
I
point.
also want to reference the Public Works building. And that
Sure.
they emphasize verticality,
This one.
which is, I think. You may want to consider here on this elevation.
Makes sense.
Maybe how they do that is where the brown is, maybe that's a little bit more in.
You're talking about,
A little larger, a little more intense, a
element
little
with a-
better design,
you're talking about that.
Yeah,
fabric?
yeah, because it's just. It's not a statement of the front of the building, the front of the building is great and this is plain.
George, you have the ability to zoom in on that laptop like, so we can look at those details and.
It is a
Okay,
touch screen.
let's see.
I don't know if you can zoom in on there, yeah. There you go.
I'm gonna try, I don't know that I'll be able to get back.
Well, that makes it look better. That helped us.
But it could be, one of the tricks were. I'm gonna go back to another page